Hello everyone, this is Rick, and today our topic of discussion is the modern age and Renaissance. Now, Renaissance, as you know, is one of the most important developments in human history, and with that started the modern age as we know of it today. So, this video is tailored according to the syllabus of Class 8 ICSE board. However, any people from any board or any person who is interested to know about history can go through this video. It will help you a lot. And also carry a notebook with you when you are going through this so that you can note down the important points. The second part of this video contains the questions and answers which will help you to understand the chapter better. And also, if you have any doubts, you can post it in the comments so that I can try my best to answer. So, without doing any delay, let's begin. Modern Age and Renaissance. Introduction. History classification. History is divided into three major periods: the ancient, medieval, and modern. This classification helps in understanding historical developments in a structured way. So, history is divided into mainly three periods. We all know this, we have studied this since we know about history. So, those three periods are ancient, medieval, and modern. This classification helps us to study history in a well organized manner. Transition significance. The transition from one period to another brings significant changes in society, economy, and governance. So, the transition of evolution from one period to another means there was some kind of drastic change in society, in the economic policies of the society, and also in governance or politics among the people. Medieval to modern transition. The transition from medieval to modern age was influenced by economic expansion, political centralization, and secularization. So, three important points you will need to understand before you get into details about modern age. That is, in modern age, economic expansion happened means the scope for finance increased a lot more than it was in the medieval age. There was political centralization, means the kings and the monarchs became more powerful, and so their power increased, the power of the central government increased. And also there was secularization. Secularization means advent of new religious thoughts, and people were very much liberal or open to those thoughts. Purpose of historical classification. This classification creates a sense of order and stability, allowing better understanding of past events. So, with this kind of classification, you can understand the history in a very well organized manner, and thus you will get a better understanding of the past events. Impact of change. The shift from medieval to modern times resulted in the evolution of new ideas, institutions, and governance models. So, this shift from medieval period to modern age was the result of new ideas, new kind of institutions, and also the structure or the system of government changed a lot. Reviewing the past, the study of historical transitions helps in understanding the changes with greater clarity and perception. Comparison of periods. Different civilizations experience the transition at different times, and their impact varied based on regional development. So, the modern period did not start at the same time all over the world. In India, it started a bit late. However, Europe was a bit more advanced in the bringing of modern age. So, comparison of periods helps us to understand the regional changes, the differences between different regions at the same time. So, this is how we get an understanding of how the modern period came. Now we will study about the period of transition. How did the medieval age suddenly turn into modern age? Or did it happen all of a sudden or not? The definition of transition. A transition period refers to the phase where major social, political, and economic changes occur, leading to the formation of a new era. So, this transition period means when there is a drastic change in society, which is social change, and also in the political and economic sphere, means in the field of management of people, in the field of governance, and also in the field of finance. So when all these things have a revolutionary change, then we call it a period of transition. Global perspective. The modern age began at different times in different parts of the world. In Europe, it started in 15th century, whereas in India, it began in the mid 18th century. So Europe was a bit fast forwarded into the advent of modern age. In Europe, modern age started from 15th century, whereas in India, it started with the coming of the Britishers in around mid 18th century. India's transition. The conquest of India by British marked a significant turning point in the transition of Indian history. So, with the coming of the British, or with the coming of the situation where Britishers started dominating over Indians, that situation led to the advent or the turning point of Indian history, that is the beginning of modern age. Foreign invasions. India had been invaded multiple times, but earlier invaders assimilated into Indian society, unlike the British. So, Indians have been invaded many times, right from the time of Islamic invasions in around early 9th century. The Islamic invasion started, and then came the Delhi Sultanate, then came the Mughals, after that came the Britishers. However, the difference between Britishers and the early invaders was that the early invaders assimilated into Indian society. Even though there were a lot of problems, but still they assimilated into Indian society. However, the Britishers did not try to adopt Indian culture. They tried to force their own culture on the Indians. That was the difference between Britishers and other invaders who came before them. So, British rule. The British ruled India for about 200 years and did not adopt the Indian way of life, leading to cultural and administrative divide. So, the culture of the Britishers and Indians were poles apart, and thus, when the Britishers did not adopt the Indian way of life, it created problems, and the problems that led to the gaining of Indian freedom and different other modern things that we see today. New political system. The British established a centralized administration that was different from Indian governance structure. So, Indian governance structure was a lot different than the Britishers. First of all, it did not have a centralized structure. Indian administration was mainly divided into different provinces, those provinces were placed under local rulers. So Britishers somehow tried to make everything united under one single government, and that too a government that was being run from outside. Characteristics of the modern period: urbanization, technological advancements, democratic institutions, rational thought, and industrialization emerged during this period. So, if a question comes, what are the characteristics of modern period? At first, you will have to say urbanization. That means people started living in proper cities. Then there were technological advancements, means there were advancements in the field of science, in the field of technology. Democratic institutions came into existence, means where people will have a voice to present their own opinion. It was not democracy as in proper sense of government, but still a few elements of democracy came into the system. Rational thought means people thought logically rather than religiously or spiritually. And also industrialization emerged. Industrialization means mass production. A lot of things began to be produced within a very limited time. That is industrialization. Societal impact. What was the impact of all these changes in the society? The transition influenced social structures, creating new ideologies related to governance and public administration. So with all these transitions, new ideologies came into existence, and that changed the system of public administration and governance. Now, what are the sources behind the modern period? Today, we are studying about any part of history. We need to understand where from did we get the information. So, those sources that give us information about the past can be divided into two parts. The first is primary source and the second is secondary source. So, beginning with the primary source. Definition: a primary source is also called an original source or evidence, refers to materials created during the time under study. So anything from the period which we are studying is a primary source. It is an original source or a evidence of that particular time. So any material or any writing, anything that we get from the time under study. Time under study means the time of history which we are studying. So anything from that time is called a primary source. Examples of primary sources: documents, diaries, manuscripts, autobiographies, and recordings that provide first hand information. So all these things are evidences of the past. Hence, these are primary sources. That includes documents, means any written thing from the past, diaries of people who were existing at that point of time, manuscripts means books or text written by the people from that time, autobiographies, you can understand it is the life story of a person, and the recordings that provide first hand information. Visual sources. Now, primary sources can be again divided into many parts. The first is visual sources, that is, paintings, sketches, engravings, photographs, films, and artistic depictions of the from the period serve as a primary evidence. So, from the name itself, you can understand the sources which you can see. Those are visual sources like paintings, sketches, engravings, photographs, films, and artistic depictions. Oral narratives means which you hear, interviews with historical figures or passed down accounts that provide primary insights. So these are oral narratives, means which has been spoken about. Official records, historical government documents, treaties, and administrative records are form an important part of the primary sources. So that time there were governments, and governments needed to keep record of their whereabouts or what they are doing. Every kind of official documents function as records of the past. So historical government documents are part of official records. Treaties means what, where the deals signed between different powers, those are treaties. And administrative records means the the accounts of administration are the important part of primary sources. Newspapers and publications, handouts, news articles, and contemporary reports in different languages serve as direct accounts. So handouts means the printed materials which were distributed among people. News articles, you can understand it was the events published in written form in newspapers. And also contemporary reports means reports of that time. In many languages, these served as primary sources. Archaeological findings, from the name itself, you can understand that monuments, artifacts, and excavated objects reveal information about the past civilizations. Historical importance. These sources help in reconstructing history with accuracy and provide authentic details about different time periods. So, from all these sources, we can reconstruct information about the past, and it will provide authentic or original information. Those information cannot be changed. What you see in the monument cannot be misinterpreted. So authentic details about the past are revealed through the primary sources. Secondary source. This is the next part of historical sources, that is the secondary or indirect sources. Definition. A secondary source is a document or recording that discusses or interprets information originally presented elsewhere. So this video also acts as a secondary source. This video itself gives you information about the time of Renaissance, which happened around 500 or 600 years ago. But is this video from the time of 500 or 600 years ago? No. This video is made in 2025, which is giving information about 15th or 16th centuries. So this document is referring to a time period which we have known from the primary sources. So the secondary sources are documents or recordings that discusses or interprets events which are originally discussed in the primary sources. Difference from the primary sources. Secondary sources analyze, comment on, or build upon primary sources, often including hindsight interpretation. So these secondary sources analyze the primary sources, and that includes hindsight interpretation. Means you will have to analyze, or you will have to extract information from the secondary sources. Examples of secondary sources: history books, academic research papers, commentaries, and documentaries based on past events are examples of secondary sources. Historical literature. Books, poems, and historical works written by scholars from later periods serve as a secondary evidence. So these things, like the books, poems from which we get information about a particular period, which states some facts about its past time, are the historical literatures. Media and reports. Newspapers, magazines, and journalistic interpretations add insights into the past events. So newspapers giving information about the past, magazines giving information about the past, and also different accounts of journalists are secondary sources. Oral histories, narratives, and interviews from individuals discussing events they did not directly witness. So narratives means accounts of people talking about past events also provide a lot of information even though they did not directly witness it. Contextual use. A single source can be considered a primary or secondary depending on how it is analyzed. So, a source, whether it is primary or secondary, depends on how you use it to know about the past. Importance of secondary sources. These help in understanding historical events from different perspectives and provide synthesized interpretations. So from the secondary sources we get synthesized or analyzed information. It also depends on the person who is interpreting the primary sources. Now let us talk about how the medieval period turned into the modern age. How this transformation happened. Historical timeline. In any event of history, date is the most important thing. So the medieval period extended from 500 CE to approximately 1400 to 1500 CE in European history. What was the time period of medieval period? Approximately 900 to 1000 years. It began from 500 CE and ended in around 1400 to 1500 CE when the Renaissance started. Scholarly classification. The term Middle Ages was coined by the 15th century historians to distinguish their own era from earlier times. So, the 15th century historians wanted to do something different, and to project themselves as more advanced, they began to term their past events into a term called the Middle Ages. Hence, the term Middle Age was coined. Key transformations. Society witnessed significant changes, including the decline of feudalism and emergence of urban centers. So, society had a lot of changes, and that included the decline of feudalism, means where people were forced to work without any ownership. That was the system of feudalism, and feudalism was the indicator of medieval period. So from feudalism, urban centers emerged. This was the key transformation. Economic growth. Trade flourished, leading to increased commerce and wealth distribution. So trade flourished means lot of business started happening on a large scale, and there was increase in transactions, means increase in commerce, and with that the wealth distribution started, means people were getting hands on money. Political centralization. Monarchs gained power, creating stronger, more centralized governments. So all the kings or the powerful people gained more power, and thus they could create a stronger government with centralized authority. Expansion of knowledge. Increased interest in science, literature, and philosophy laid the foundation for Renaissance. So people began to be attracted towards science, literature, and different other philosophies. This led to the creation of new ideas, which eventually caused the Renaissance. Social reforms. Individual rights and prestige became more prominent during this transition. So, individual rights means people started having their own rights, or they started having this concept that each people can have certain rights. So, early form of fundamental rights came into existence, and they gained a sense of confidence and self respect. Thus, this, these were the prominent features which led to the transition from medieval to modern age. Now we will go directly into Renaissance. What is Renaissance and what happened during this time? So definition. Renaissance, meaning rebirth, was a period of European civilization immediately following the Middle Ages. So Renaissance means rebirth. From the word itself you can understand that something new started happening, and this period is the time just after the Middle Ages. Classical revival. It was marked by a renewed interest in classical scholarship, reviving ancient and Roman knowledge. So people started getting attracted towards their own past. As I said, a sense of confidence developed among people, and confidence comes to a person or to society when they have a rich past. So people started to delving deep into their own past, that is Greek and Roman knowledge. They started studying the Greek and Roman literatures which existed hundreds of years ago before their time. Exploration and scientific advancements. The period witnessed the discovery of new continents, the shift from Ptolemaic to Copernican system of astronomy and decline of feudalism. So new system of astronomy. Copernican system means the system where it was believed that uh, the sun was in the center of the solar system. So people started to have new ideas, and those ideas were being proved by genius scientists of the Renaissance period. Economic and technological growth. Commerce expanded and powerful inventions like paper, the printing press, the mariner's compass, and gunpowder were introduced. So many new things came into the human lives. That is, paper. Paper was not that much widely available before the time of Renaissance, and paper was used for printing on a mass scale. So the things which the texts which took months to produce could be produced in a matter of days. So thus a lot of texts began to be circulating in the society. The mariner's compass helped the navigators to navigate to unknown lands. The gunpowder showed the military skill of the Renaissance people. So with all these things, there were advancements in all fields of life that led to economic and technological growth. Intellectual awakening. Scholars saw this era as a time of revival of wisdom and learning after a prolonged period of stagnation. So, this period was seen as a revival of wisdom, as a time when people became wiser after a lot of days of being stagnant, means they were stuck on one thing in a time period. There were no advancements. Then suddenly Renaissance started happening, where there was a revival of wisdom. Scientific inquiry. Renaissance led to scientific progress with a renewed focus on logic, mathematics, and exploration. So, with the advent of Renaissance, there started scientific progress, and people focused on logical thinking, they focused on mathematics, and also they became adventurous and explored different parts of the world which were never thought to have been existing. Political changes. The capture of Constantinople by Ottoman Turks in 1453 influenced the spread of Renaissance ideas. Now, this was an important event in the European or Central Asian history. That is, there was a place called Constantinople. In Constantinople, all the intellectual brains of Europe lived together and prospered their knowledge on science and technology and also philosophy. So all the intelligent people were living in Constantinople. However, Constantinople was attacked by the Ottoman Turks, who were formed the Islamic ideology. So these people, Mehmed was the name of the ruler who conquered Constantinople, and the intellectual people had to flee from there. They had to leave Constantinople, and they went in different countries of Europe. Now, these people were very intelligent. So, when they settled in different countries of Europe, in those countries also they started spreading their new ideas, and thus Renaissance started happening in Europe. That was the role of the fall of Constantinople in bringing the Renaissance. Impact on society. The Renaissance influenced various aspects of European life, including literature, art, philosophy, and politics. So, Renaissance did not play a role in only one aspect of life, it had its impact on different fields like literature, art, philosophy, and also in the system of governance, that is, politics. Now, what are the features of Renaissance? What are the markers through which we can say that this was a period of rebirth? Revival of classical learning. There was a renewed interest in ancient Greek and Roman texts, leading to intellectual and artistic advancements. So, people in search of their past glory or in search of self confidence started to see their past in a more detailed manner, and their past was filled with Greek and Roman texts. So they started studying those classical literatures, and that led to intellectual and artistic advancements. Scientific innovations. Scholars explored new ideas, contributing to progress in astronomy, physics, and medicine. So there were renewed interests in astronomy, physics, and medicine. Great artists. The Renaissance was a golden age of art, with figures like the Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo producing masterpieces. So during the time of Renaissance, different forms of art came into existence which were more liberal. So before this, during the last stage of medieval period, the society was rooted into conservative Christian beliefs, and that led to stagnation of new ideas. However, at the time of Renaissance, different scientists and artists produced masterpieces, and those things were much more liberal. They broke free from the stagnation of ideas. Literary achievements. Writers like William Shakespeare emerged, creating some of the greatest literary works of the time. So, different writers, mainly writers like William Shakespeare and different other poets, also emerged during this time. Exploration and curiosity. This period encouraged explorers such as Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci, and Ponce de Leon to discover new lands. So these people became very much adventurous, and they had their ideas of exploring the world, of discovering new lands, and thus they discovered two new continents during this time. Economic centers. Italy became a hub of Renaissance with cities like Milan, Venice, and Florence, where Venice was the center of trade and commerce, and Florence was the center of art and culture. So, Italy became the hub of Renaissance. It had many important cities which contributed a lot to the growth of new ideas. Trade and finance. European cities became financial and trade leaders, establishing strong economies. So all the countries became competitors of each other, and they established strong economies or strong financial structures of their own. New ideas in art and science. The Renaissance witnessed innovations in architecture, which means in construction types, in designs of buildings also, there was a huge change. New perspectives were there in painting and study of anatomy, which was prohibited during the later half of Middle Age, was taken up as a hobby by different scientists. Anatomy means study of human body. You can see the effect of those studies in liberal arts of the Renaissance period. Religious Reformation. The influence of Catholic Church declined as new ideas of humanism and individualism spread. So Catholic Church means the old form of Christianity declined, and there were new new ideologies in the field of religion which developed, and that gave people a lot of freedom than they already had. Voyages of Discovery. Voyages means going in different parts of the world. So people led expeditions to discover new lands. Portuguese exploration. In the early 15th century, Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal encouraged expeditions along the African coast. So Portuguese were very much advanced in the field of adventure. So Prince Henry encouraged the people of his own country to go along the African coast and search for new resources or wealth. Christopher Columbus in 1492, Columbus sailed west coast across the Atlantic and discovered islands, believing he reached Asia. Okay, so Christopher Columbus wanted to find new route to India because India was the richest part of the world during those times. So Christopher Columbus wanted to establish business relation with India that would make Europe richer. So in order to find new route towards India, he sailed westwards, which have been correct if the continent of North America and South America did not exist. But while going to India, he was obstructed by the continent of North America and South America. So, thus, he discovered the new land in 1492. Vasco da Gama's achievement. A few years after Columbus, Vasco da Gama successfully sailed around the southern tip of Africa and reached India. So, Vasco da Gama founded the proper route towards India. And so, just a few years after Columbus in 1498, Vasco da Gama discovered the sea route to India. Magellan's circumnavigation. In 1522, one of Ferdinand Magellan's ships completed the first circumnavigation of Earth, proving that the world could be fully navigated. So, Ferdinand Magellan was a navigator who decided to go around the world with his ship. He did not live to see the end of his journey, but one of his ships returned and proved that Earth was completely navigable. And with this, the debate whether Earth is round or flat also came to an end, proving that the Earth is round. Transformation of European worldview. Within a few decades, European perspectives of geography and trade were completely transformed. So, people gained a lot of new valuable knowledge about geography. They acquired new resources from new land, and that led to the growth of trade and economy. Age of exploration and Renaissance influence. This period was fueled by Renaissance achievements in cartography. Cartography means the scientific process of making maps. Navigation means to find out ways with the help of different scientific instruments. And also shipbuilding. Stronger ships needed to be built so that they could cross oceans. So all these things were new disciplines in human lives which came along with Renaissance. Impact on trade. The discoveries led to new global trade routes connecting Europe with Asia, Africa, and the Americas. So these discoveries led to the creation of new trade routes, and so new companies. One of the most famous company is East India Company. So all these companies started happening, and so people of Asia, Africa, and America became connected with each other. Cultural exchange. The voyages resulted in exchange of goods, knowledge, and cultures between different parts of the world. So, when business happens or when resource exchange happens, it is not only material that is exchanged. Voices, culture, and ideas also are exchanged among people. So, that led to the part called cultural exchange, which was the most important facts of Renaissance. Age of exploration. Now, how was the world explored during the time of Renaissance? Time frame. The age of exploration, also known as the age of discovery, began in 1400 and lasted until the 1600. So, during these 200 years, a lot of new discoveries were made. Global expansion. During this period, European nations embarked on voyages to explore and establish new trade routes across the world. So, Europeans became adventurous. They had new ideas of exploring the world. So, they went on voyages to establish new trade routes or to establish their dominance around other parts of the world. Key discoveries: explorers discovered new routes to India, which was the richest part of the world, various regions of Far East, and the Americas. So, these places were discovered with the help of sea routes and with the zeal of European explorers. Influence of Renaissance. Exploration efforts coincided with Renaissance, which encouraged advancements in navigation and scientific curiosity. So, the exploration needs to be supported with proper technological infrastructures, and that was the Renaissance which gave proper technological facilities for these explorations to be conducted. Portugal's role. The age of exploration began in Portugal under the leadership of Henry the Navigator, who sent ships to map and explore the western coast of Africa. So, all the world, whole of the world today should be indebted to the person called Henry the Navigator, who encouraged the Portuguese sailors to sail across the western coast of Africa and make proper maps. So, with this started the age of exploration. Advancements in mapping. Portuguese explorers went farther south than any previous European expeditions and successfully mapped much of Western Africa. So, they could make maps for Western Africa, and that was a key for other later time navigators to discover new sea routes around the world. First European to reach the Indian Ocean. In 1488, Portuguese explorer Bartolomeu Dias became the first European to sail around the southern tip of Africa, opening a new route into the Indian Ocean. So, before this, no other European came to the Indian Ocean. However, Dias crossed the entire portion of Africa and reached into the Indian Ocean, which later on, just 10 years later, Vasco da Gama, through the same route, would reach directly to India. Spanish exploration efforts. Spain sought alternative routes to Asia. Christopher Columbus attempted to reach China by sailing westwards across the Atlantic. So, Christopher Columbus decided to go round the world and come back to China, which would have been actually possible if the continent of North America and South America did not exist. So, from Europe, Christopher Columbus decided to go westward, and thus they will reach to the eastern part of Asia. Now, many books mention the fact that Christopher Columbus decided a wrong route to go into Asia, but he was not wrong. He just did not have any idea that he would be obstructed by two big continents. So, those continents did not exist in the mind of European explorers. So, he was actually correct in mapping, but because of not North America and South America not being discovered, he was proved to be wrong. Columbus's voyage. After failing to secure Portuguese funding, Columbus was sponsored by Spanish monarch Isabella and Ferdinand. His 1492 voyage led to the discovery of new world known as the Americas. So, Columbus went to the Portuguese people for funding, but Portuguese government ignored his idea, and thus he went to Isabella and Ferdinand, who were the monarchs of Spain. They funded his voyage, and thus America was discovered in 1492. Facts about the age of exploration. What are the facts regarding the age of exploration? Terminology. During this period, Europeans referred to Southeast Asia as East Indies, reflecting their search for spice rich lands. So, Europeans called the portion of Southeast Asia as East Indies, and thus it reflected their search for spice rich lands, and this greed of spice led to the domination of Asia by the Europeans in the next 200 years. First global circumnavigation. The first attempt to circle the globe was led by Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan. He did not live to see the end of his journey. He died in middle of the journey, and thus his first attempt to circle the world was successful, and that also proved that earth was not round. Magellan's fate. Though Magellan initiated the journey, he was killed during the expedition and did not complete the voyage. Uncharted territories. Many areas of the world remain unexplored even after the age of exploration. So many areas of the world were unexplored, and so the zeal for exploring those areas also came forward when the age of exploration started. Regions discovered later. Eastern Australia, the interior of Africa, the Arctic, and the Antarctic were mapped only much later. So these regions also eventually was discovered by the Europeans. Long-term impact. The age of exploration dramatically changed European perspectives on geography, trade, and global connections. So, this age of exploration had a huge impact on all the aspects of the known world at that point of time. Now we will go through the questions and their answers, which will not only help you in exams but will also help you to understand the chapter better. What are the characteristic features of the modern period? The modern period is marked by urbanization, technological progress, industrialization, democratic institutions, and rational and scientific thinking. Monarchies declined and religious influence in politics reduced. The period introduced new governance systems and encouraged inquiry, reform, and individual rights. What are primary sources of history? Give examples. Primary sources are original records from the time under study. Examples include documents, diaries, manuscripts, autobiographies, paintings, sketches, photographs, interviews, newspapers in English and regional languages, monuments, artifacts, and oral history. What are the secondary sources of history? Give examples. Secondary sources interpret or analyze primary sources. They include history books, novels, poems, documented records, research works, and writings by Indian and British authors during the British period. They are created after the events, often with hindsight. What is Renaissance? Renaissance means rebirth. It was a European period after the Middle Ages. It revived classical learning, encouraged exploration, replaced the Ptolemaic with Copernican astronomy, weakened feudalism, expanded commerce, and introduced innovations like paper, printing, compass, and gunpowder. Explain few characteristic features of Renaissance. Renaissance revived classical learning and scientific inquiry. Constantinople's fall brought Greek scholars to Europe. Art focused on humanism. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo flourished. Printing spread ideas. Individualism and secular thought grew. Knowledge became accessible. What were the important discoveries? The astrolabe helped determine latitude using stars. The magnetic compass was improved during the Renaissance. Portuguese cartographers created accurate maps. Shipbuilding advanced. Large galleons became common. These discoveries made long sea voyages safer and possible. What is the age of exploration? The age of exploration 1400 to 1600s saw European nations exploring sea routes to India, the Far East and the Americas. It began in Portugal under Henry the Navigator. Explorers like Diaz, Columbus and da Gama changed world geography. So this was all about the modern age and the Renaissance. We have read about important factors that led to the growth of Renaissance. We have also seen the different achievements of the period. Hope you have liked this video. Please post in comments if you have any doubt and support me so that I can bring brighter contents in future. Thank you so much for your love and support.